Hi, so this is going to be my video for the research project on education modules for disability and teachers to learn new things and implement disability inclusion in education. So, first, I'm going to start off with a little bit about me and tell you a little bit about the services that I've received as a client and how I am now giving back to that organization. About me. So, hello. My name is Julie Oliver. I'm 25 years old and I was born with spastic triplegic cerebral palsy, which affects my ability to walk, meaning that I use a wheelchair, walker, and leg braces to get around. Spastic triplegic cerebral palsy affects three areas mainly and is usually characterized by spasticity or stiffness in the affected areas. For me, this is my two legs and one arm. Cerebral palsy does not define the person I am, and throughout most of my life, I was told to do as much as I could to integrate myself into society as a fully functioning individual living with cerebral palsy. Play and Learn was our family's first integration into Holland Bloorview programs and services. Since then, I have been an active client of the many services and programs offered by Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital. As a teenager, I was diagnosed with scoliosis, curvature of the spine, a condition which I now know is common among children and youth with cerebral palsy. Being diagnosed with this condition made me want to rethink the level of ability I had. I have a cortical visual impairment, meaning that for most of my school life, I used many forms of assistive technology to help me navigate through school. I'm currently a post-secondary student to become an accomplished social worker one day. When I'm not working on school, I like to write and work on social action projects. One of the best strengths I possess is advocacy for others and myself. Although I am still working on the prospect of self-advocacy, at times I feel like this is an essential skill when you work with populations who deal with disability. Advocacy is a key aspect of social work, both as a profession and an individualistic approach. Professionally, social workers can use advocacy to promote and endorse skills in clients and families affected by forms of disability. If you ask me what type of social work support I would like to provide, it would be a number of things. I think students with disabilities deserve to make choices in their lives just as much as any other student can, regardless of the level of education they have. Engaging students with disabilities in goal setting and planning processes allows them to have as much autonomy and choice in matters that concern them. When certain goals are laid out for the student to achieve with the student's knowledge of that goal, it helps them to set goals aligned with their mindset. When planning for the future, it is important to remember and understand that students go at their own pace, and students with disabilities want independence, dignity, and autonomy to make choices in their own right. Since it is not the parents driving the future for most students with disabilities, goal setting and planning should have the students at the forefront of everything that goes on to ensure clarity of understanding future endeavors. Ensuring students have adequate advocacy skills allows the student to speak up for their own rights and responsibilities in the school system when it comes to advocating for accessibility needs. Having future plans specifically set out by the student allows parents and educators to see the students put their advocacy skills into practice. While allowing the student to talk about their own skills and goals. One key piece to highlight is that once a student reaches college or university, their future is in their hands, and life becomes more about the supports they must access to be successful and independent as possible. For me, this meant going to student leadership meetings on my own and meeting EAs in classes I knew the routes to and successfully navigated to on my own. My first 2 years of high school, I switched aides a lot, went in my walker for physical activity, and had fun with friends. But the one thing I recall the most is my own O&M instructor, Pam, who helped me with visual aids and wayfinding throughout my school life. She was instrumental in helping me develop systems and resources to help fill my toolbox for my visual journey. This included large arrows laminated and printed on brightly colored paper, things outlined in black marker instead of pen or pencil, large textbooks, Large textbooks later converted to electronic books, and whiteboards for most of elementary school. In both my grade 11 and 12 years, I was assigned an amazing educational assistant who always made sure I was well taken care of throughout school. One thing I appreciated that she taught me to advocate for myself and others in a way that suited my needs. With the help of a mentor and several community leaders, we created Monarch Park's first Accessibility Advisory Committee, which aimed to increase levels of accessibility throughout the school. During my last couple of years of high school, I was heavily involved in many of the planning processes that are typical for a student with a disability. So that I could move on with enough knowledge to successfully conduct myself in the real world. The best way for parents and educators to teach kids, youth, and students about the importance of understanding and advocating for their needs is actively engaging them as much as possible in activities related to that goal, such as practicing independent living skills and self-advocacy. Advocacy from a child's perspective could be as simple as knowing the name and effects of their condition and understanding that their parents may be different too. Parents are child's first educators, and it is important that they offer as much education and stimulation to their children as possible so they grow up to become active members of society at large. Children with disabilities grow up to be youth, young adults, and adults with disabilities. Parents can teach their young adult life skills as much as they want, but I think the real test comes when youth with disabilities step into community life for the first time. My first attempt at doing this was through the Independence Program. At Ryerson University in 2015, where I lived away from home for the first time with no one telling me what to do. My roommates, Logan, Chad, and Casey helped me immensely to come out of my shell in an independent environment, and 3 weeks later, when my parents picked me up from the program, I noticed I was a different person. The real kicker was that they noticed and acknowledged that I could be independent. Educators can help children, youth, and students learn to advocate through the use of authentic representation in media and overall society. A good example of this is the book Not So Different by Shane Burkall, where he tackles the most common questions kids ask about disability. My favorite page to read personally was how does your chair work, because this is a question we get all too often by kids, and sometimes even adults wanting to know, like, a lot about how disability works. Uh, for me, growing up with two typical sisters who in physical no. For me, growing up with two typical sisters who in physical development never lagged behind their peers, it was still my duty to educate them on disability issues. A good example of a book featuring heavy disability representation is Say What You Will by Cammy McGovern, which features a high school student with cerebral palsy and a high school student with ADHD as they navigate the complex challenges of life together, teaching about disability through the use of books on positive representation is a good way to engage your students and inform them that they are not alone in their fight for disability justice. During my high school career, I took a course called Equity and Social Justice. This course, along with my introduction to anthropology, psychology, and sociology, helped inform a basic understanding of grassroots concepts of creating and maintaining successful advocacy organizations. The first video we watched in that class was a TED Talk by Stella Young, who coined the term inspiration porn. This was as close to a course in disability studies that I've ever gotten. I wish in the future more schools and institutions have courses like this to help students understand and develop their knowledge of the field. Areas of interest in 2021 are leaning towards healthcare systems, and healthcare advocacy is as important as ever as we navigate this challenging time. Youth with disabilities can help inform and make positive policy decisions affecting them. Okay, I don't think I have to do that. During elementary school, kids typically need a lot of help to do everything that constitutes their day-to-day needs. Kids like me do not have a lot of access to specific help unless a SIP is hired to help the student. Making decisions in elementary school required a lot of thinking, and my village of people, and then just support me and speak out for a great deal of my needs throughout my years of elemental education. I had many friends in elementary school who were typical and many with disabilities. One of them ended up being my neighbor a couple doors down on my street in Toronto. She always called me the Queen because she would tell me to sit up straight like the Queen, and that was the best way to get me to listen. Decision making at any age is an important aspect of the humanistic approach towards disability. Friendship, allyship, and community integration are important aspects of life for any student with disability. No matter your age or stage you are at, the concept remains essential to fulfill the quality of life. Modifications and adaptations were my reality as I navigated through most of my school life. This came in the form of adapted math curriculum and a special program that allowed us to practice and hone reading skills. Textbooks throughout most of my school life were large print, and reproduced and distributed with the permission of the publisher. They were brought to me by my visual itinerant teacher who specializes in helping students find the best equipment and large print literature resources to help students in their studies and community. Family integration and activities is an essential part of everyone succeeding. I feel that in large part my sister helped me develop my skills in a variety of areas. Every Wednesday for about 4 weeks we both took a multicultural cooking class, which was a hit. It never really fazed me that either of my sisters came along to my activities. My advice to anyone with a sibling who doesn't have a disability is to integrate and accept your brother, sister, or sibling as much as possible in family life. The Sibling Survival Guide, indispensable information of brothers and sisters of adults with disabilities, provides information and resources to help siblings of adults with disabilities, with everything from prevalent statistics to advocacy tips, aging with a disability, and caring for multiple generations. This book served as a resource for those in a similar situation to me, where at some point they will require additional assistance from their family or siblings. Throughout most of my school life, independence has remained a steady concept. People ask me all the time what it was like to live independently from my parents. The truth is, it was amazing, but I didn't get there. But like every other disabled person, I didn't get there on my own. They say it takes a village to raise a child with a visible physical disability. Now, as I am in my adult life, I can say it takes a village to find adequate services. When we moved to Kingston in April 2020, I was tasked with the idea that I would need to find services and resources that would suit myself and my needs before we moved. My initial thought was really, do I have to do this? But eventually I kind of realized that it was essential to my livelihood, and it would benefit everyone. Independence throughout high school was a very daunting task at first. I was shy to engage in advocacy and wanted people to know who I was without saying much. I was afraid at the time that I would be ridiculed by staff or peers because certain people weren't accepting of my limitations. In high school, I became student council royalty when I was elected to student government fundraising chair for the whole entire school and fundraising efforts. I participated in countless TDSB wide wheelchair hockey tournaments, accessibility advisory committee meetings, vocal ensemble, choir competitions, among others. Independence is a vital part of who I knew I was to become. 2 years had passed before I got the opportunity to work with a very special person. Students with disabilities will grow close to the support staff who help them to learn, grow, and be more independent. Personally, my support staff played an integral role in the development and implementation of independence and independence skills within me. I participated in art club where I enthusiastically created authentic abstract art for my own enjoyment. Later on, Jenny walked in and an instant connection with her. And literally everyone related to her. She coached our hockey team to finals, ran a volunteer program, took me to class in the pool, and instantly knew whenever I couldn't take part. Enlarged my work when the print was too small, watched me work with students as I honed my skills in observation and behavioral analysis, took me out into the community work site so I could participate in cooperative education for high school students, took countless photos of the foods and teams in culinary arts class, and most of all made it possible for me to take part in all aspects of high school life and all the other activities everyone else was doing. My favorite activities at school were athletic banquet and getting to see our accomplishments placed on a larger scale. Being with everyone else in the athletic space was really empowering for inclusion in sport. My school gave me the opportunity to participate in a lot of cool activities that I wouldn't otherwise get the opportunity to do. A big decision that I'm proud to have made was my college decision. Throughout most of high school, I knew that I wanted to go into social services as a profession. I did not know where the best place was to go for that. My grandma talked to me about a friend she had that worked in the infirmary at Carleton University many years ago. Additionally, I kind of had an older friend who took human rights in school and had told me that there was this amazing program that kind of helped him to be useful and finish his studies. So I applied, got in, and successfully entered a world where I knew I could have the independence, freedom, and dignity to be my own person and live my own life. When I was there, I met some great people, and I am fortunate enough to still keep in contact with some of them. Yes, I believe identification what is that? There. believe identification, placement, and review committee meetings are an essential part of any student's schooling who self-identify as having a disability. In interdisciplinary practice, teachers and educators meet and go over each student's goals and objectives for the future. I think all students with disabilities should have the opportunity to attend IPRC meetings because it provides them with a basis to begin to understand their own needs and develop a wide range of skills resulting from that. For this one, I think it depends on the age and developmental stage of the student you are working with. So, for example, if you're working with, say, a student in the lower elementary grades, like grade 1, 2, or 3, obviously you're going to consult with the parents on everything that's going on with the child, but as that child kind of matures and gets older and more able to advocate for their own needs, it is important to kind of realize and recognize that students may want to take charge and for students in high school who are preparing for future studies or employment or skills development stuff, everything can seem a little bit more daunting of a task for them, and especially when it's their first time going on the journey. But when a student says they want to try something on their own, I think it's the duty of the educators to allow students to have the upper hand in their journey, which kind of means that they empower students to take charge, make change, and foster positive relationships relationships with advocacy strategies. When a student reaches college, university, or employment, it is not the parents or professor's job to go after them to advocate. They are there to learn, therefore, this is their advocacy journey. However, I do respect wholeheartedly the times we are currently in, where some extra help may be required to help students with disabilities both know their overall educational goals and fulfill them. Yes, there has been a lot of people who have underestimated me doing things. I can think of so many times where this has happened, and I've just, like, kind of, sat back, let it happen, and later on realized, oh yeah, maybe I should have done something about this, that, or the other thing. And I'm gonna tell you about a few of those times. There are many situations when, like, even when myself, I thought it would be easier to give up rather than fight for the right to do something that everybody else thought I couldn't do. So, I'm gonna go over a few examples of this. And I provided a PowerPoint slide presentation with a couple of these on it as well. So the first example I want to give is from a time that I lived away from home. I lived in Ottawa and was commuting to a placement as part of my social service worker diploma program. That was my area of choice. My placement supervisor had placed me working at an employment center for youth with students with disabilities, something I was very excited to take on. When I got there, my supervisor asked me all your typical run-of-the-mill questions new placement students get. She did not say anything about accommodating or what I could do to fulfill my placement hours. All she wanted to ask about was about transportation and how I would get there. And while this is a pretty key aspect for someone living with a physical disability, because transportation modes are far and few between now that I live in not a city. And but this I still lived in the city. Basically, I lived in two cities at the time. Uh, I was going to Ottawa for school, and I lived in Toronto with my parents when I was home. Anyway, there was no talk of accommodating me in the workplace thereafter. I felt like she was underestimating my abilities because she never really gave it a second thought as to how to accommodate me. Better workforce development programs should take into consideration that every student is different and unique in their physical capacity and needs, and some may need additional accommodations in the workplace. And that is completely okay if they are written out and people know like what they are and what you want to happen. Like that can happen and you can have a good time. So an additional example is related to college when my professor was being discriminatory and gave me a fail grade on an assignment where we developed life skills lessons for people. I wanted to do something about disability for it, as anyone with a disability can tell you that is what they're most knowledgeable and versed in is disability. Some may choose to use their disability as an idea for like a career, or others may not. So I wanted to do something about disability for it. The rest of my group wanted me to find education costs for quote average students. Just by looking at me, I think you can tell that I am not an average student in life, and my abilities can be received or perceived much differently than I want. Sitting in my wheelchair, going about my day with extra help, and wanting to do academic work that aligns with my interest has become my average day, while while my abilities may be different, it does not mean students need to hide or have fear. I can learn and work just the same, but sometimes my ability tells me differently, and I have to make accommodations to work a little bit of extended time frame. What I want educators to know and embrace the most is that disability doesn't have to be a taboo subject. Disability can create uh, many teachable moments that allow students to be more open and honest with themselves, so that when they meet an individual with a disability, they don't have to be nervous or shy when asking questions. Uh, physical physical disability gives me a leg up in knowledge of disability and disability issues. My fellow students did not want to do anything related to disability for the group project, so I was seeing lack of representation first and from my college peers. There really needs to be more education, more education at the college level about disability and inclusive culture across a variety of disciplines. Diversity counts, so make sure that educators know this and believe in the perspectives, knowledge, and ideologies of students with disabilities to ensure a more inclusive world. My professor never really gave me a solid explanation of why she ended up failing me out of the course, because of her own perceived lack of abilities that I had and a lack of understanding towards new ideologies in academia for students with disabilities. She too has an eye condition that makes it difficult to see, and accommodations make it easier for everyone. This is a social action environment where empowering your students while making them feel comfortable and supported should be top priority. The subsequent example was funny. When I came home one day from the Canadian National, no, I don't know, Canadian National Institute for the Blind community hub down on St. Clair Avenue in Toronto a few years ago now. I was in the car with my sister, and she told me that there was no way that I could do work with people with low vision, because she thought that, she has low vision, she can't read Braille, she can't do a lot for people herself. Anyway, I have low vision, as I mentioned in an earlier question, and it's just kind of annoying when people basically underestimate your ability to work with a certain population. When you know that person is essentially now part of that population. She wears glasses, and long story short, I know so many people with low vision and degrees of blindness now. That is crazy, or that it's interesting to know the different perspectives. So, yeah. One of my greatest accomplishments that no one thought I could ever do was quite simple. It was living on my own for the first time without parents, with my own agenda. I've done this several times. At camp, but this time I was really moving out. And I've done several things in the past, like moving out boot camp and the independence program through Holland Waterview Rehabilitation Hospital. But the first time I was able to move out on my own and show my parents and family that I could be independent was the best feeling. Even better, most of my friends who were initially a little scared to move out, like to say and did so under my guidance. To student, my advice to students and parents who were initially a little scared of a child moving out and branching out on their own. It's a fantastic idea for those looking for independence, dignity, and self-worth. My aunt and uncle were very proud of this accomplishment, and surprisingly, we still kind of talk about it to this day because it's so interesting just to kind of see how things work. The truth is, independence has changed my life and made me a better person because sorry to interrupt. Okay. Educators can be mindful of this up to date current trends in the field of interest, maintaining a positive relationship with students to ensure they know that educators have the student's best interest in mind and can relate to the student and their needs. If an educator knows a student's academic skill, it is much easier to meet them where they're at rather than assuming what their abilities are. In college, I believe that professors can take notes of the student's skills and abilities to facilitate a positive learning environment. Professors should not be saying no to students when they address or suggest something that might help them. My special education teacher allowed us to create a transition binder to help the post-secondary transition team. I was involved in a post-secondary students transition conference called Strategic Learning in the college environment just a month prior to my first year of college. This helped me immensely to have the knowledge of what skills and supports I could have access to while in college and see resources that were available. I had a lot of support from my family and friends for the transition to college. My grandma, probably my number one supporter and cheerleader through it all. She knew Ottawa and the culture and was so proud to see me flourish and grow. My oldest sister was extremely supportive of my decision too, and she played an integral role in my life so far. When we moved to Kingston and things changed, she was a bit skeptical at first, but eventually came around to the idea. My ally from my previous college is a massive supporter of my work in advocacy in the social work sphere. I knew I could depend on him if I couldn't anyone else. Gabriella, who works as a social worker in many of the areas that I'm very interested in, has been a massive help in developing my passion for the field of social work and beyond. She has worked with me as a youth who attended the Independence Program in 2015 in partnership with Ryerson University and Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital. I also credit my high school teachers and cooperative education placement Boston High School, Archie and Allison, for getting me to the space of recreation space for individuals with disabilities, families, and communities. Additionally, my colleague, also in co-op, and my friends Emily, Aaron, and Zana played a small part in getting me to where I am. One thing I wish educators knew when I was in school is that as people with disabilities, we are just as capable of accomplishing and setting realistic timelines. For ourselves, educators should be aware of concepts such as accommodation versus modification for the purposes of student engagement in the programs and services offered by the school. Education assistance is something I always received throughout high school and for the purposes of my own academic development. If you are an educational student reading or listening to this right now, you should treat your students just as you would want to be treated. I had an experience when I was at a basketball game in the school gym and was looked down upon for needing help. College program coordinators should also take into consideration their students' skills, knowledge, and abilities towards the field they're working in to better understand them and have a positive relationship.